Hi everyone, Ugo Arinzeh here with Onyx Property Team. As you know, I absolutely love being a buying agent. Sometimes I don't talk enough about the relocation side, which is where we actually help people looking to rent. And on this episode, I am so proud to have Dawn Wilcox on. She is a previous client, but I also count her as a friend, who we helped going back 4 years now, so a few years back. So welcome to the show or the episode here, Dawn, and thanks for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great. Well, wanted to ask you, and I'll let you use your own words to describe a little bit about your decision to move over to London, what drove that, and then we'll talk a little bit about how you found me. So tell us a little bit about you and your family and the move over to London.
Sure. So my husband's company relocated him over to the London office. He had been traveling back and forth, and they had offered him that opportunity. And we, as a family, so myself and our two boys that were teenagers at the time, and the timing of it would be that my oldest son would be staying in the US, going to university, and my younger son would be joining us, and then we would need to find schooling for him. And so we had about, if my memory is correct, I think we had about 6 months initially that we were in the process of trying to figure it out. It ended up being, I think, probably like about 10 months maybe in because of COVID. So
Right.
it got delayed a little bit. And I was mistaken in believing that the company was going to connect us with some type of service that would help with the transition. So I truly believed that we would be getting assistance with schooling and housing location. And so, whatever process of us starting to realize, like, oh, we have to start doing things, I realized we didn't actually have that. And so I was Googling, I believe how I found you is that I was Googling school, like relocating from the US to England for schooling. And you actually had a video that talked about it. And then I saw underneath that it was expats moving to England. And there was another one like best locations as an expat. And so I just started watching your videos and then realized, ooh, an American that moved. And I think you mentioned New Jersey. And so that's where we were from. And it just felt comfortable right away. Like, ooh, I want to reach out to her. And I think that this will be a little bit helpful because you were talking specifically in some of those videos about the transition from US to England. And you were responsive. I want to say got back to me within a day. Probably only a few days later, we set up our first call. Um, to me, it was like, yes, like this is meant to be. This is the person who's going to help us. And yeah, and it was just, I mean, I don't believe we would have been able to do the transition, honestly, without you. So, yeah, and I don't mind explaining the ins and outs a little bit more if that's helpful.
We'll talk about that. Yeah, I remember actually it was a long lead time up to us actually working together a little, I think, because you were trying to figure out your timing and when things were going to happen and how much you could be involved. And, Mark was coming over or was kind of back and forth initially. So there was quite a bit of, I think, months in preparation. I'm sure you as a mom trying to put everything together for your family while your husband's the one that's overseas. So I think it made for a unique dynamic, but I remember that taking months to work into the schedule. And again, I think it just highlights recognizing that these global moves are months in the making and something that I'm very happy to work with people over a period of time. People don't have to make a decision tomorrow or have it all figured out because there are so many components to it. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. But yeah, talk a little bit about your then experience because while Mark was the one physically here, we'd had COVID. you were still working abroad, you were still sorting out your second son, and the navigation of that. So however much you want to share with that, I know it was
Yeah.
important that it was really the three of us working together to find you the right home.
Oh, 100%. So, basically what we would do, and we were furnishing, like,
Yeah,
so that's like
that was
next phase. But yeah, so basically Mark came over, I think about 4 or 5 months before Noah and I were planning, and that was that decision was made because of COVID, because I wasn't 100% sure that my older son would be able to
going to school.
physically go into school. So it was kind of this limbo of making sure everything was,
Yeah, settled.
ready before. And
And you
so
were selling your house, I think, as well.
yeah, yep. And we had the two dogs, so you were also helpful with that. So I'll talk about that a little bit as well. Um, so yeah, so basically what we would do is you would send listings to Mark and I, we would look at it. We also, that what I think is important to know is Mark and I were not familiar at all with London and the different areas. We also didn't know where Noah was going to school yet. So there was sort of this, I think by the time we really started looking, if I remember, we got him situated in a school. And then based on that, you were offering us listings, and yeah, we would go through the listings, and I think I think we would just all communicate, and based on the description and the condition, you had asked us, I think one of our first meetings, I remember you had asked us like, what are the most important things? And so we were able to, yeah, and so that was Mark and then myself. We had the two dogs, so we needed somewhere that would be accepting of the animals. And what would happen is you and Mark would set up your visits, and then I think the majority of the time I was included through FaceTime, and you would just be videoing Mark walking through and showing everything. And then it would be, okay, like this looks great. This isn't also the outside. I remember getting a few, you would also send videos if I couldn't be there. So I remember getting a few videos of the actual town, the high street. I specifically remember the Q video of the little village, proximity to the tube. And so it just started to help make sense and connect the dots, and for us just to have a better understanding of like what the options were, because we really didn't
It
know.
is so often it's a journey, right? And it's like when you don't know what you don't know, you're only going to end up picking like one house, right? So that means really everything else you see is going to be rejected or doesn't match
Yeah,
up for whatever
yes.
reason, right? So it's about that journey such that when you do find, I think, the right property, it makes sense. And, my job is to help you feel like you have all the pieces of data to make that decision, right? So if the house feels right, but you don't know what the area is going to be, or you're commuting or the green space. And I know for you that lifestyle with your dogs was so important in having the morning walks. And I remember once you were in the house, how that was part of your life, right? That was part of your routine. And I'm really excited and happy to hear you're still in that home. So it's worked out as a really great fit, and hopefully when it's time to transition on. But no, absolutely. And it's one of the things I love, because every time, you have to start somewhere, and having those key criteria is important.
Mm.
So it gives me a sense of what's important. But then also, we then had to juggle a couple of variables such as proximity and commuting. I remember that was an issue, getting him over, what train lines he could get to, how you, Mark, would navigate. And so putting those dots together and then discovering Q. I know we looked at Chiswick and some things,
Yeah.
suited, but as you said, the pets might have been an issue. So there are quite a few variables, but because I don't think you ended up seeing it till you actually moved over. And
Oh, yeah,
along the way, we had
yeah,
actually decorated, right? So we found a
yeah,
house that was empty, and that's an additional service we can offer people is to help. And it was so important that you and I really communicated and gave you a good sense of what we were going to furnish for you and everything else. And that was a fun time. Actually, I love the interior design perspective as well. But when you
yeah,
got here, there was enough here so that the home felt comfortable, right? And then you could
yeah.
add your
Yeah, well, it felt like a home. And what was really nice was obviously the transition's like this huge transition. And but to come into a space that you and I had been communicating about and picking things out, and then to just see it all set up. So just another thing, Ugo actually, like every room, the duvets and there are decorative pillows and lamps and just kind of put this little extra personal touch on it. So it felt like, wow, this is a home. Like I came in and it was just so yeah, I just remember that feeling when I walked in. I'm like, oh wow, this is everything we talked about and we
vision
picked and
came to
worked.
life. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that part was really, really spectacular and took a lot of pressure off of both myself and Mark because Mark wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah, because it was Christmas time or you just spent Christmas and then you
Yes,
come
yeah.
over and then obviously Noah's gonna have to get integrated with school. So it was really a lot to juggle. So no, I'm glad it worked out and I think it was just a testimony of yeah, the commitment, but I love what I do. So it's absolutely a joy and a pleasure to do this and to see the end results, which is why we're getting to have this conversation. So one of the things, I guess, for purposes of somebody watching this video, when it comes to relocating, is there anything particularly that stands out? And again, you relocated with pets that you might say is particularly surprising or challenging, or that you might say, hey, you want to try to get ahead of this if you
Yeah. Oh God, that's a great question. I mean, the pet transport was definitely more complicated than I thought, more because of US into
into the UK.
UK. So that was I would I did need a bit of time figuring all of that out. That was a bit of a chaotic piece. And then shockingly, all came together. They arrived, I want to say, an hour after Noah and I arrived. But I didn't know that there were companies that just organized all that. And I think you had worked with a client before and you had shared that. So that was very helpful. Um, yeah, there's so much I was popping into my head. Like, I mean, this is just being silly in a way because I'm just wasn't familiar with using public transportation. I genuinely didn't understand that like we didn't have to live in very close proximity to where Noah was going to school. So our experience before was our children went to school, their primary school, a half mile from the house, and then their secondary 2 miles from the house. And they were either walked, rode their bike, or we drove them. Now I know that also happens. Noah ended up riding a bike to school majority of the time that he went to school here. But I think we believed we had limitations of where we were looking. I do remember like afterwards realizing like, oh, we could have been looking anywhere like on the district line and that would have been fine. um,
Yeah, and
so
the abundant transport definitely opens up so many options, right? So you can
yeah,
get around quite easily. So yeah, that's great.
yeah. And I think where we ended up, as I've shared with you before, is probably the better spot for us, just being in Richmond, and we have Richmond Park, and we're by the river, and we have cute botanical gardens. Like those are all things that we just love Richmond Riverside, um, and but we easily can head into the city if we have, you know, for the theater or dinners. So yeah, I think I don't know if I'm really answering the question, but I feel like in looking back, being maybe okay with there's going to be things that are going to be a bit confusing at first. Connect with people who have the answers. Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's a good point. And I think yeah, I think the transport's a big thing because again, growing up in America, I think we feel like we have to drive to everything and there's such
yeah.
a limited um, options in terms of how you navigate that. Whereas here in the UK and especially in London, you can have so many more options because of transport and commuting and just, yeah, from a lifestyle in each little neighborhood, which again is what I love, has its own personality, right? So you can kind of self-contain yourself within your 10, 15 minutes of your closest high street, but also expanding out is pretty easy to do. And then coming back to whatever, if you are somebody who wants quiet streets and outdoor space and things like that, still have that, but still be well connected into the hustle and bustle of prime
Yeah.
central London. So, no, I think that's great. Obviously, when you are relocating or looking for rental, there's so many other different dynamics, and we'll put this in some of the show notes because just navigating the rental process, making an offer, getting that accepted, furnished versus unfurnished, that type of thing. There's quite a few things that are going to be very different here to the UK versus the US or abroad, and we can help navigate as well. We've mentioned pets, that's a big factor. The irony is, I think London is one of the most pet friendly cities in terms of where pets can access, but it might be 50% of the options out there might permit pets. So it's ironic. So again, we can help people search for whatever is important to them because ultimately relocating is about getting comfortable and settling in and yes, it's the bedrooms and bathrooms, but it's the lifestyle, and we really want to take that into account. So
And that might be something to reflect back on too. I remember thinking like, ooh, um, is it going to feel difficult for the limited space? And I'm air quoting it because now it doesn't really feel limited.
mm,
So
mm,
it's interesting how
you adapt.
you can adapt to what you have and you realize like I don't actually need to have a walk-in closet. um so yeah, so that transition was actually a bit easier than I thought, and now I actually prefer that. I think something that was like too spacious would feel a bit too much now that we've adapted that way.
That's such a great point because I too, moved from a huge house in Washington, D.C. into a two-bedroom flat when I first got here. And you realize it is a very different lifestyle. And I think the great thing about London is it is meant to be lived out a little bit. So
Yeah.
whereas in America, we have our big dining rooms and big kitchens and people come and visit and it's like, oh, let me show you the house. And it's really about entertaining in your home, which is nothing wrong with that. Whereas I think the London lifestyle creates you can experience life a bit more outside the house, right? So your
Yeah.
home is lovely, it functions, but also your high street will offer you so much to enjoy, right? Not very far, but again, you can meet up with friends a lot easier. So, I can't entertain 6 or 8 people for dinner in my house, but I have a lovely, neighborhood joints, multiple that
Mhm.
you can experience. So I think that's a great point in terms of there's things you adapt to, but hopefully there's enough of the important things that are there, which is having the people you love and the things that are important. But
Yeah.
then there will be things you're going to have to trade off. And I think London does a great job with outdoor space. So maybe it's not your own personal backyard, but again, we can find those neighborhoods that have
Oh,
great green
yeah.
space around
Yeah.
the corner and things like that.
Yeah, even just the parks, just
Parks, yeah.
that it's accessible. And another, I think something that was enjoyable that I wouldn't have anticipated is meeting people from all over. So most people that I meet did not grow up in London. And so you just have this opportunity of just meeting so many people. And so a lot of people have an expat experience of coming from another area. And so that's comforting in a way.
Yeah, no, I think that's the richness of London. If you're willing to embrace that, I like to say there's a tribe for everybody, right? So you can find a tribe, but you can also open up yourself to meeting different people and really getting to experience life in a different way. And that's, yeah, that makes it quite special.
Yeah, yeah.
Great, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Again, appreciate you taking the time. And I think again, what I try to do and having this series to go back and talk to some of our past clients is it's really about trying to serve people. But I like to say you start off as a client, but you end up as a friend, and hopefully we'll catch a drink again soon. I know we've been able to do that over the last couple of years, but it's wonderful to see people who we've been able to work with and help them match up and achieve their goals for moving or relocating or buying into London. So thank you and Mark for uh, the opportunity to do that. And yeah, excited to see you again soon.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Well, if you are thinking about relocating to London and don't know where to start, I am always happy to have an initial consultation. So please make sure to reach out. Our contact details will be on the screen, but you can also reach me on WhatsApp at +44 770 318 3750. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Bye for now. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button. And if it's your first time on my channel, don't forget to subscribe to make sure you don't miss a single episode as we put out weekly videos about the London property market and living in this incredible city.